Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, wake up. We're talking Red Raiders, slept on. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks again for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you today. And today we are talking Z's. We're talking most slept on, as at least Locked On Texas Tech sees it, as we continue to look ahead to the 2024 season for the Red Raiders. You know, there is, I think, a pretty fair collection of guys that are not being slept on at all. And we've talked about many of them for weeks on end now, whether you're talking about some of those on the defensive side, like Jacob Rodriguez or Ben Roberts, whether you're talking about some of those along the offensive side, obviously your quarterback in Baron Morton, Taj Brooks, the collection of wide receivers that we have discussed over and over, beginning with Josh Kelly, and maybe even throw in a tight end or two, I guess. But today we're going to talk about some of the other guys that we feel like maybe are flying somewhat under the radar heading into the season. And Chris, I know we'll hit on some of these, and I know we'll probably miss on some of these. There'll be guys out there that are going to emerge as well that maybe we or nobody else sees coming. And I guess that's one of the things that's always fun about a new season, right?
Yeah, there are guys that and players that deserve to be talked about, that deserve some hype based on what they've done or the credentials that they have when they come into a program or transfer in or from a high school situation. But there's so many guys on a football team that you know, maybe don't get a lot of the offseason talk. Not that they want it, but I think that we were sitting here talking about trying to come up with some guys. And like, I think the guy that it's funny you mentioned Z, because he's one of the other guys that Caleb Douglas, I'll get to in a second, who plays the Z receiver. But I'm going to start out with, I'm going to throw up the shout out to Des Bryant. I'll throw up the X because I think like a conversation like this was made for a guy like Coy Aiken, Cowboy Coy. And here's why. I think that he's had a couple of injuries. Okay. The collarbone has been an issue twice for him. So he's missed some time. I think this is a younger player that has a lot in front of him, yet we've seen glimpses of what he, you know, is what he can do. And I think, you know, we always talk about go back to that Wyoming game last year. And he was one of the guys that you didn't think it would hurt you, but, you know, he was hurt. You know, he had one of those collarbone injuries in mid-August. And I remember at the time you're like, yeah, okay, we'll be okay. But I think as you saw it play out and he kind of started to push through, I think that him not being available kind of hurt you a little bit and early on. His second, I think, ever college reception was against Baylor for a touchdown. I think he caught a touchdown in the bowl game. And I just remember back in August, he was lighting it up. And he was who Tyler Shuck was really targeting and going to and all these different things. Anyway, I think that Josh Kelly deserves a lot of the talk. Dre McCray, kick returner and all that stuff. I think we know about Micah Hudson. I just think Coy Aiken is like ready to kind of emerge here. And that big long throw that Baron Morton made that he put out on Twitter the other day, that was to Coy Aiken. Cowboy Coy, man, and he's tough. He's as Texas Tech as you would want somebody to be. And I just not that he wants it and not that he necessarily deserves it yet, but I just think that he's kind of an under the radar, sneaky key part of what this team could be next year.
Texas Tech through and through. I mean, even down to the red head, or should I say scarlet head. Yeah, I think Coy Aiken is a great choice. And if he can have some better luck from a health standpoint, I think would become a very consistent, frequent, and reliable target for Baron Morton or really anybody else that might be slinging it at any point in the year. Let's stick with your group of pass catchers. And before we get back to Caleb Douglas, I wanted to throw another one at you that was somewhat, I guess, in a similar type of vein, in that we saw him, make some impact, gain some traction as far as getting going as the year went on, but then sort of derailed as well outside of his control with some injuries and being hobbled to a degree. But that was Jordan Brown also, I thought, was someone that now in a very crowded pass catching room. I'm curious to see how some of these guys, find their way to getting looks and getting some balls thrown their way. Because it's a much different room than it was last year. But he's another one that I think fits into a lot of what you just described there. And then it was kind of like a delayed progress kind of thing because sometimes he just wasn't available.
Yeah, and he had, I think, 21 receptions last year. This is somebody that was one of the few that could get behind the defense. I go back to that West Virginia game. I think they call a go route. It's on Tech's sideline. It was early in the game, and Shuck threw one, and it just like 2 yards overthrew him. Otherwise, if it's properly thrown, I think that Jordan catches it, and maybe we have a different conversation about how last season went, because I think you potentially could have gone on to win that game. It was early on, and you were kind of pushing, and they were pushing. There was no separation. You were just trying to find your footing there in a wet Morgantown. But yeah, he's got some juice in a group that lacks that. He is one of those. I think Jordan has grown up a lot. I think that he doesn't necessarily deserve a lot of chatter yet, because we're still waiting to kind of see this potential. But very similar to Coy. I think that's a great comparison. I think Jordan will be one of your top rotational guys, but he's got big playability, and I think that is something that you lack, and he's got some juice to him and a little swagger, and his mom listens to this podcast. So we certainly appreciate JB.
Or used to. She may be boycotting us now. I can't remember where we're at. We kind of went back and forth with Miss Icy Fashion a year ago, but you're always welcome back onto the wagon, man. I'm glad to have you. The guy you mentioned, Caleb Douglas, I think is a really interesting one, Chris, because it's not very often that an SEC or Florida transfer is like the third or fourth guy that you're thinking about if you're talking about a pass catcher or somebody that you hope can stretch the field. Again, I hope that fact is a credit to what that group of pass catchers looks like this year, but it's kind of been that way. He's sort of, I guess, flown under the radar, if you can call it that.
Yeah, Caleb Douglas, who you're referring to, is, again, I think Josh has gotten a lot of hype, and part of that is my fault, but I can't. It is what it is, and I think that Josh Kelly is ready-made. I think but Caleb Douglas is somebody that there's been some injury history there. I think that he's got all the measurables. This is the stretch the defense guy. And again, it's unrealized potential to this point, just because he's been young and a bit dinged up a little bit. But his high school credentials were off the charts. And I think that people are probably not. And what we mean by this, it's not that the Tech fan doesn't know who these guys are, that they're doubting them or whatever. What we mean by this conversation, at least the way I'm coming at it from, is these are guys that I think, like, you get into mid to late September, after you get in 2 or 3 games into the season, to where those people that haven't seen a ton of the program start to pay attention and go, whoa, they got some guys that can play other than a Taj or a Josh Kelly or whatever. And I think that these are some candidates for some of those conversations, because, and the other one, to me, because Caleb Douglas in the spring game, I mean, deep ball over the shoulder. The other guy is John Carlos Miller. We have talked a ton about him on this show, and I think that deservedly so. However, the general opinion is going to be more about Conyers and Tharp, and
Yeah.
I get it. But
Also deservedly so.
Yes, but remember what I told you about the whole Ohio State thing. They were like, "Hey, dude, don't move into Tech. Don't go to a class yet. Are you all squared away there yet?" I mean,
Yeah.
And they were trying to recruit him up until the last minute. And it's funny because I was sitting here looking at the tight end depth chart. We could also sit here and probably make a case for Mason Tharp being slept on. If you want to look at it in some ways, we are focused on the new fancy shiny toy. When Mason was healthy and it hadn't been as much as he would want, he's somebody that's got pro potential. But back to Miller, we saw that in the spring game, and it's different. He's almost like a big wideout, not a tight end, but he does. Can play with his hand in the ground and can block and do some things. And he's got a lot of the twitchiness that they like, that teams like, that coaches feel like they can use and create some mismatches with. And you're in good shape for next year whenever you do graduate Jalen and Mason, because I think John Carlos is somebody that can kind of step right in. So, anyway, I thought we kind of looked at a lot of the pass catchers here on the offensive side, but I think that people hopefully can kind of understand where we're coming from on having those conversations about those guys.
Yeah, let's get to some names on the defensive side of the football that I think are really interesting. One of those.
First, today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and it does it all while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within only 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, let's get to some names on the defensive side of the football that I think are really interesting. One of those, you kind of have to, unfortunately, get back to an injury conversation in Isaac Smith, a guy that we didn't even, get a glimpse of last year. And, his biggest moment, I guess, was on Locked On Texas Tech preseason shows, because you and I were talking over and over about how excited we were to see this guy out there, and just the whole thing gets derailed before we even get rolling down the tracks, man. And I'm excited to see Isaac Smith, rooting for some obviously better luck from a health standpoint this year.
Yeah, Isaac only played in a handful of games 2 years ago. The one concern there for him is he hasn't played a lot of football. With the time off, he is, he's 6'6", 260. He is a specimen. And I think that experience is the concern. I'll take you back to these moments. And it's in Joey's first year. It's at the tail end. You're in Houston. And he's flashed quite a bit leading up to the end of that season. And to the point where, because it was, hey, we can, we've got still games that he can play left. We can still redshirt him. And it's like, who is this kid? And he's just showing up. He's flying off the screen, and he's just doing all different kinds of things. And I remember people just were like, where did he come from? We've had him? Why weren't we playing him all year? What are we doing? And we saw all these things, but I remember the left tackle from Ole Miss was so frustrated by Isaac Smith that he cheap shot at him and took him out of the game, literally.
Right.
15-yard. Well, and you know what? I don't even know if they actually saw this one, but he stomped on him.
Yeah, I think this one they missed, actually.
Yes, he stomped on his hip because he was just sick of. He couldn't. And this was supposed to be an NFL type left tackle for Ole Miss at the time, fringe guy, whatever. And Isaac's just outworking him, running around him, through him, spin move, all kinds of things. And we know there was a lot of juice in the building that night, and it was very emotional and just a lot of energy in there. And Ole Miss was doing a lot of talking, and they did a lot of losing. But that just summed up what Isaac Smith is. I'd rather just take you out and cheap shot you, man, because I can't block you. And this is a big boy. This is a big boy SEC left tackle.
Yeah.
And so Isaac, unfortunately, he had the issue last August where with a knee and all that. And so he just has missed a lot of time. But he comes out of spring as the starter at one of those end spots, those edge guys. Should tell you a lot, I think, from some guys that have been around already, and he kind of passed them up. A lot of upside there. If anything, I feel like I've done him a disservice by bragging on him or talking up his potential so much on a platform like this, to where I don't want to have anybody come away with unrealistic expectations. But I mean, it is what it is. Big fan. This is a Locked On / Isaac Smith podcast. Here is what it is.
That's right. And that tackle for Ole Miss had another bullet point placed on his draft profile, scouting report: mental midget. All right, Chris, let's stick on the defensive side of the football. This one, when you mentioned this to me, I was kind of thinking, how could this guy be slept on? And then immediately I'm thinking, well, I'm sleeping on him too, because I feel like his name's not getting mentioned all that much. Maybe it's because we're kind of taking for granted what he can do, but CJ Baskerville is a guy that may be in this kind of category, and a guy that is ultra important, obviously, as you try to fill so many shoes and so much impact within your defensive secondary and there on the edge as well. So I'm really excited to see what he can do this year after some time spent in the system, obviously, and spent with the program. Was a really good player at San Diego State before he winds up back in Texas with the Red Raiders. And like I already said, I think he is of vital importance to Tech and to Tim DeRuyter, that he does continue to be a really good player.
Yeah, I think is he like an all-conference type? Not necessarily. How vital is he to Texas Tech's situation on defense? I would say extremely. I think that he's one of your better, more proven, even though I feel like in some ways he just got here. Yeah. He's one of your better, most proven guys on that side of the ball, and he's got some position flex to him. They've moved him around a bit, tried some different things, and there's not. It's hard for me to like draw or connect these dots or draw this comparison, but it's some level. So I need to scale it back, but at some level, this is kind of the Rabbit of this year's defense, even though he's only been here for a little bit. But you look around, there's just not a lot of people that have been around for very long at all. But he's played a ton, and he's played more than most. And he's done some different things positionally that allows him to have some of that knowledge that like a Rabbit would have. But that's not necessarily a fair comparison to CJ, because Rabbit was in a different category. But I think there's something there if that makes sense. But I just don't think like the around the league, there's a lot. Oh man, CJ Baskerville, look out! But I think from your standpoint, you're looking at it like he means a lot to your situation, and he had like 78 tackles. This is somebody with like 4.5 tackles for loss. He had about 5 pass breakups. I mean, all these different things, and it just speaks to kind of all the different ways that he can affect a game. He can play the run game. He's good in coverage. I mean, he's got some size to him at 6'3", 210. So, yeah, he is somebody that, while our fans, I don't think are necessarily sleeping on him. I think that, he's a lot more important than I think people realize, especially outside of the Texas Tech bubble.
Well, and I'm trying to recall, I may have missed a move here or there, but a star. Is he the star, or who did we swap around here? Because I know he spent some time there at least for a period. I think.
He did. He's now playing basically what they're going to term the boundary safety, or the strong
Okay.
safety is the way they would term it. But he has played. He replaced Muddy a year ago, and kind of at star and played some of that, and then they kind of switched it up a little bit. And
You
he's
think that's
just
a better fit for him on the back end, maybe, or too early to tell?
I think based on the way this team is built, that may be a better fit.
Gotcha.
Whereas last year's team, they needed maybe somebody, at star, because they had some of those experienced DBs like a Rabbit. You had your two corners and all these different things. So Baskerville already came in as being, I think, faster than somebody like Muddy, and maybe being better in coverage, especially down the field. But where Muddy was so good, it was just like at the line of scrimmage, and that Star is a hybrid, and so I think that they're going to allow CJ to maybe showcase his coverage abilities. But again, he can get his neck in there too in the run game. He's got some size and good tackler and all those things. I mean, he was a defensive MVP of a bowl game like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
he's got some skins on the wall here. This is just somebody that. These are fun guys to have, and it sucks when you lose them, because I wish this is like a guy I wish he would have been here the entire time. It just didn't work out like that.
Yeah, and I asked about the fit because I don't have the measurables right in front of me to compare, but I kind of viewed Muddy Waters as maybe a little thicker set dude than Baskerville was whenever he's being called to task up near the line of scrimmage. But again, maybe some advantage there as far as flexibility, agility, and speed on the back end for a guy like Baskerville. So we'll see how it works out for him this year. One more I want to get to before we get to some of these that are maybe more questions about, are they being slept on, or is it really too early for them to be that close to making an impact to be considered that way? This is a guy we just talked about yesterday, and maybe he's starting to get some attention because we talked about him in the context of a Dave Campbell's All-Texas team mention, and that was Braylon Lux, which I told you yesterday that I did kind of feel like I hadn't been, thinking much about the impact that he could possibly make until we really had our conversation. So I suppose maybe he did fit that bill.
Yeah, like I'll go back to, we highlighted his one, low light, I guess, maybe, recently, as you mentioned, Troy Franklin. And again, Bo Nix to Troy Franklin, they burned a lot of folks. I mean, this was an unbelievable QB wide receiver combination last year. They got him on a go ball. He took one step the wrong way, and then Troy Franklin's you're just looking at the back of that jersey, and it's like, damn, but he wasn't. Braylon was not alone there, and I can't sit here and tell you exactly how the coverage was supposed to be and all those things. I just know that we saw that it looked like he was the one that was manned up with him. Anyway, I move on to say that, to highlight more of a lot of the internal thought, like Braylon should have been starting. I'll go back to a couple of things though that happened here that we probably should have mentioned in the scope of the conversation that we had about Braylon. Do you remember in the Kansas game, and there was a quarterback that went out with an injury on a 4th and 1 run named Jason Bean? Braylon Lux is the one that knocked him out. Okay, I'll offer that up. Mm-hmm. I'll also tell you, I believe there was not one but 2 interceptions, one of which would have been a pick 6 last year by Braylon Lux, both called back due to penalty.
That's right. I forgot about that.
And so there was some glimpses here of everything that he could do, and I probably my fault for not offering some of that up yesterday when we were talking about that part, because those are either game changing in the Kansas situation, or they're potentially really game changing if some of those penalties, and those weren't his fault. It wasn't a PI; it was a penalty elsewhere. But I just think that. And I have said corner is a question mark and all that, and I do think it is, but I just don't think he's one. I don't think he is a question mark.
Let's get to some of the guys I was thinking about that may be more in a minor sleep kind of category. if they're being slept on, or maybe if I'm just maybe they're a little bit too further down the depth chart than I might anticipate. But one of those is back on the defensive side of the football and up front in Dylan Spencer, who, when you're talking about Isaac Smith, I'm thinking about Dylan Spencer as well, who last year was thrown into the fire and got a lot of meaningful reps. Physically, he's got some gifts to offer as well. I know there are some things that are going to be asked of him. I feel like we saw this year. I feel like we saw some great flashes from him last year, and I'm not so sure that he's a household name for Red Raider fans just yet. What do you think about Dylan Spencer?
He's not a household name. I wonder if he has, some impact next year, like would be natural progression if we're not talking about him in this space like a year from now.
Gotcha.
I still think he's got unbelievable physical attributes. I still think he's still catching up to the maturity of what it takes day in and day out at this game. But I think what you'll see with Dylan is you'll see some flashes this year, and you just what you want to turn those into is consistency.
Yeah.
To where it's just one bright light, like steady. It's not like going off and
Right.
on and all that stuff, right? But I mean, there's not many guys on this entire team that were more highly recruited or thought of as a high school player than him, nor that look like him.
Right.
That check all the measurables boxes, because when he puts it all together, look out. And I can only dream of him on one side and Isaac on the other, and you're turning a couple of country boys loose around the edge, and that's a lot of fun because that's what Dylan is. Dylan is a country guy all the way from way outside of Houston, and that's what Isaac is too, from Oklahoma. I mean, they're just a lot of respect for those guys and the way they go about their business. But Isaac's just a bit further ahead, I think, in the grasping what all this level takes.
Sure.
So.
Would love to see them turned into the bookend bad boys. Let's get that going as soon as possible so we can put it on a t-shirt. Okay, how about a name in a totally different kind of context, but one I know that a lot of Tech fans are curious about, in AJ McCarty. Where are we at with McCarty's chances of factoring in? Can you qualify him as slept on, or do you think there's still a longer process maybe to get him completely immersed and in the mix?
Well, I'll say this: when he came in, I think there was a healthy respect for what he could potentially, be, and you run out the ground ball and trying to get him eligible and all these different things, and then you just realize, okay, it's not going to happen. And I think that the transfer year is hard because now it just doesn't even exist anymore. Guys don't have to sit out for transfer anymore. But having to be a not like an upperclassman, but being a guy ready to play, and you've already done kind of a lot of that, and then having to sit for a year when you're healthy is probably pretty difficult mentally, just to be engaged and there's no payoff. I'm just like, I can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
And when I get to play. And it was the weirdest thing that he actually did get to play in the bowl game due to a court ruling, like, a day or two before?
Yeah, like 30 minutes before kickoff or something.
Unbelievable. So strange. Yeah. They're like, I guess we'll just let him run up down the field on special teams. So I think there wasn't a lot of hype about him coming in the spring, just because you weren't still you felt like you knew what you had, but then it's like this year off, and we're not real sure where he's going to factor in or kind of all that. And I think that he, at the tail end of the spring, I think he impressed a lot of folks. I think he's got some versatility to him, and he is kind of at that hybrid star and can do some different things type. I don't think if they're totally set on where ultimately he will be.
Gotcha.
Because he can do some different things. But he, I remember telling you, and I think they firmly believed it, that had he been eligible last year, and he wouldn't have really missed any time at that point, he was good enough to start for this defense, and I think he would have somewhere or been a top rotational guy. So I think it's a great guy. I'm not ready to say that people are sleeping on him because I'm not real sure what to expect.
Yeah.
But he's a great person to ask about because I'm guilty of talking him up quite a bit last year before the season, but then you kind of push him back to the end of the line a little bit, and now let's reintroduce ourselves here. But I think it's a great name to bring up.
Really quickly, one more before we get out of here, Chris. This guy, a really young guy, a newcomer. I think someone that maybe the coaching staff or those internally would say, oh, yeah, he's being slept on, and we love it, and he ain't going to be slept on for very long. Cameron Dickey is the last guy on my list that I really wonder, say 6 games into the regular season, how are we viewing him? 12 games gone by, how are we viewing him? Because I know he's getting a heck of a lot of conversation about him as a freshman.
There's 2 things there's 3 things that will largely determine the answer to your question. How willing is Kenny Perry, willing to play Cameron and Cameron and sit Taj? You can talk about it till you're blue in the face. You can say this is the plan. You can script it, but when push comes to shove, and he's sitting over there next to you, and then I'm getting like text messages like, dude, why is Taj standing next to you? What are we doing? Right. And yet he can't be out there every play.
Yeah.
He's taking a pounding on the plays you're not seeing when the ball's going elsewhere. And with that, I would say, how good is Cameron Valdez? Because Cameron Valdez is going to get the first shot at the extra reps, but he hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy. Now he's added a little weight and all that, but that's where Cameron Dickey factors in. And the last one is that part I talked to you about, Taj, is that if he can't pick up the blitz and he can't deliver that punishment and protect the QB on the plays that when he's not getting the ball, we can hype him up and we can sleep on him. We can do whatever we want. You ain't getting out there, man. It's like you got some – but I think to his credit, I think he's done enough there and shown the ability, and he's got the build and stature for it that I think he's already earned some trust there. But nobody's as good at it as Taj. But those are the kind of all the dynamics that will factor in where we can even see, Cameron Dickey much at all, because he's got some obstacles in his way to get to that point already.
This has been a Locked On Texas Tech sleep alert. Sleep on them at your own risk. Would love to hear your thoughts as well. If you've got some other names to add to the list that you feel like are being slept on as we get nearer to the 2024 kickoff. Chris, great stuff as always, man. Appreciate the time.
Hope it is alive, and I'm not sleeping. Well, I need to sleep for a few more months, but then it's wide awake come September. That's right, or August 31st, I should say. But smash that subscribe button. Thank you for listening, and appreciate everybody for joining us today. We'll join you again tomorrow.
Yeah, we got like 47 sleeps to fall camp, like 77 something sleeps to kick off. It's just around the corner. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for being out there. Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. And of course, the best way to help us grow the show is to comment anything below on YouTube. So thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.